So when the more we expect, the less we can love. But the less we expect, the more we can love. So when David does something nice to you, rather than saying, it's about time, or that's part of your job, you can be delighted. I wasn't expecting a thing. When Priscilla does something nice for you, you don't have to say that's your job. By the way, an impossible marriage is when you understand your role, your roles. Priscilla, God said you to be a helpmeet.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Thursday, July 6, 2023. Yesterday I brought to you a video about some situations going on in Texas related to Anna Duggar's brother-in-law, his church, Fair Park Baptist Church. And my goodness, yesterday after I got that video completed, I got an email back from Fair Park Baptist Church, which gave me a heads up about the speech that Michael Keller gave me. And then not long after that, literally someone from Fair Park Baptist Church sent me the email that David Waller was sending to church members about the situation and how the church was going to handle things. Apparently, this has basically blown up all over the internet. The local media is covering it now in Fort Worth. People are really outraged, and David and his team are publicly saying one thing and then privately telling people another thing. And in my communications with this member, I learned a lot more details about this church that I think you might be interested in, including that notorious letter that David Waller wrote in favor of Josh Duggar's early release lighter sentence, like asking the judge for leniency in the case against Josh Duggar at his sentencing. So let's dive into this topic. Before we do, can you please do me a big favor and give this video a thumbs up? Also, please subscribe to my channel if you've not yet subscribed by clicking on the subscribe button down below. Make sure to click on the bell so you can get notified of any time I go live or new content loads. If you have a comment, make sure to leave one. If you want to share this video, make sure to share it. And let's talk about this and dive in. So yesterday afternoon, once I finished my video, I got an email from the media manager at Fair Park Baptist Church. Now, the really funny thing about this is that it says media manager, and I'm just going to tell you that this is a little bit ironic because as far as I understand, there's only a few people that are on staff at this church. It's not a super big church, and the very same statement was actually sent to church members, with it being sent actually from David Waller. So I believe this message, the media manager per se, could be David Waller. So it says, Fair Park Baptist Church apologizes for the comments that guest speaker Mike Keller made during a Sunday school lesson on June 25th that referenced the issue of slavery. The comments were hurtful and reflected a misrepresentation of racial and historical issues, and we completely disagree with the statements that were made. Fair Park Baptist Church affirms that racism and slavery are wrong, sinful, and violate the scriptures. As part of our faith, we would never condone slavery nor tolerate any kind of prejudice against people of color. We seek to follow God's words found in Romans 12:9. Let love be without dissimulation, hypocrisy, and abhor that which is evil, and cleave to which is good. Okay. So very similar, almost identical to what they gave to Star Telegram, and so that was the statement that I received. Now, I followed that up with some questions about what they had to say about comments that Michael Keller had made about women and husbands and wives in a relationship, and if a husband and a wife, if a husband is unfaithful and say wants to go out and purchase having contact with a woman of the legal kind, because in most states it's not legal, that the counsel would be that she just forgive him. So if a husband commits a criminal act, then the wife should just forgive him. That's kind of, and they didn't respond to my comment. They also did not respond to my questions about David Waller being called out by Emily Anderson from Thriving Forward, where she accused him of basically aiding and abetting Gothard in grooming, and the things that she said Gothard did to her, David was present for. Now, put that in your back pocket because that's actually going to come up here in a minute. So once I got that email, I was like, okay, basically nothing to see here is kind of what they're trying to say. So not long after that, I got an email from someone who is a member of the church, and the email that David sent to church members is a little bit different than the public statement that they put out. Now, I'll just say, I'm not going to repeat what the first part of the letter says because it's exactly what he literally said to me in my email. The lower part of the email says, due to the significant attention this has received in the media, we find it necessary to call a special meeting on Sunday following our main service to share some background information and answer any questions you have. Additionally, until further notice, we will not be live streaming services, but rather posting the sermons once they have been reviewed and if need be edited. And then it says, feel free to reach out to me, has his phone number, and then it says sent by David Waller. It says Fair Park Baptist Church pastor and deacons. So this is him basically saying, okay, here's our apology, and then we're going to hold a special meeting because we need to basically explain to you the background of why these comments were made. I don't know what kind of background information would help anyone to explain why he said what he said. The whole context of the sermon was on their YouTube channel. Most people heard what he said. There's no context or background needed for the statements that he made to know that they were racist. But it seems like he wants to maybe help people. I don't know. It seems very gaslighty to share background information. I'm going to try to say that Michael's not like that. Michael didn't mean that. That's not what we stand for. Background information of what? And then him saying that they're not going to live stream services, but they're going to have to edit them and review them due to this scrutiny. That just tells me that they're trying to hide better. They don't want to get called out. They don't want to get caught saying something that's inappropriate. And so instead, they're just going to hide it. So if someone does say something that's either racist or whatever, they're just going to edit it. Here's the thing, and this is what I would tell David is, you should be having sermons where you're not delivering these kinds of messages, and then there wouldn't be a problem. Not to mention, they're not going to edit out the harmful things that they say about women. So it's like one part of the problem here. Now, the former member I spoke to said that there are maybe one or two people of color at this church. For the most part, it is a highly Caucasian white congregation, not a super big congregation. They said maybe 100 people, a little bit more, that go to this church regularly. And that David was actually hired after one of their pastors stepped down, and he was not on a list of people that, like, apparently when the pastor that had been running this church stepped down, they were looking to replace him, and they asked members to bring up names of people. There's some deacons, like 3 separate people that are the deacons, and so a lot of people were suggesting maybe they would want to take over. Now, before David got there, this member said that it was conservative Christian, fundamentalists, Baptists, independent Baptists, but not necessarily IBLP. There were some IBLP people there. There was some families that were part of it, but it wasn't necessarily an IBLP-focused church. There wasn't all these weird rules about relationships and courtships and, dating and how to handle intimate relationships with people and that kind of stuff. Like, there wasn't all these requirements on dress and modesty. It was a lot looser is how they described it. It's still conservative, but not IBLP conservative. And they said that once David took over, the former pastor, while was a conservative Baptist pastor, was a lot, they described, more hands-off in that He didn't necessarily get involved in the private lives of people's lives. He didn't tell people how to handle their marriages. He didn't try to force people to go under his counsel. He didn't try to dictate what people wore and how they acted. He didn't try to dictate and control relationships, anything like that. And once David came in, basically what the member said is that it got very IBLP. And David brought in a lot of people from the Alert Academy that, again, I told you Big Sandy's like an hour and a half away. So people that are in the area within a couple hours are going to Fair Park that are from IBLP. And so the congregation turned into a very IBLP heavy congregation. And they said that's when all of the rules took place. So David starts trying to insert himself. They allege that he's very pushy. He has very specific attitudes about what you should and shouldn't do in a relationship, how you should date, what you should wear, how your intimate relation should be with your spouses, wanting to know details about spousal relationships. Wanting to counsel literally every member and take everyone under counsel, which they actually found to be very creepy. Here's how they described the differences between David and the former pastor Kevin. They said, Kevin was very respectful about personal space and didn't push beliefs on people as far as I have heard. He did do couples counseling, but only for couples that asked for it specifically and were having problems. David has no respect for boundaries and will push his beliefs on you and try to force you to come under his counseling. It's honestly creepy how curious David seems to be wanting to know about people's sex lives. So that was this member's response into something that had occurred when they got married, and some of the counsel that David was giving to members about their own marriages and, what they should be doing in their marriages. So basically how they described the changes in the way that the church changed from the time that Kevin was there until David, it says, as far as I remember from when Kevin was pastor, the main thing that changed culturally was the way that everyone started being taught about relationships and getting married. I probably only remember the things that pertain to me and my age group because, to be honest, I zoned out most sermons and really never listened to any of the sermons taught by either Kevin or David. But once David became pastor, a lot of the couples started being told what they could and couldn't do. And David started being very pushy. I wouldn't say David was harsh or mean. He just acted super smiley and nice, but would be very straightforward and pushy with his beliefs. After my husband and I got married, David basically forced us to come to his office and he proceeded to tell us about period sex and how the Bible says we aren't supposed to have intimate relationships during a woman's menstruation. He was telling us what we could and couldn't do when we have intimate relations. It was crazy, and we were shocked at how pushy he was. Kevin would have never done that, for example. The culture in the church definitely became more judgy and everyone was tense, especially the original members, as more people from the IBLP started joining. David would just run around and do the couples counseling, and I'm not sure what all kinds of nonsense was being said with those couples, but I know that David was definitely trying to control people and situations and push his Gothard teachings onto people. So this is like right out of Bill Gothard's playbook. He is obsessed with knowing about the intimate details about the intimate relationships of his congregation's lives. And I just want to say this, if you are someone that is part of a church and your pastor is asking for these kinds of details about your life, run. It is nobody's business if you are a married couple, even if you're not a married couple, to ask you for intimate details about your sex life and wanting to dictate to you what you can and cannot do in the bedroom with whoever it is that you're having intimate relations with. Married or not, it is nobody's business but your own and the partner that you're choosing to do this with consensually. While some churches will say, they just want to uncover sin, it's again not their business and it's not their place, and it's a huge boundary and a huge leap to cross. These are things that you shouldn't have to tell anyone unless you're comfortable, and someone being comfortable enough to ask you and to bring you into a to a meeting to have these kinds of conversations with you is a huge red flag. There's other details about how he just got very fixated on also with single people. He didn't want anyone self-pleasuring themselves, and they also started spending a lot of time speaking about the dangers of online adult content. And so obviously, I'm going to bring you to this part. Think of all this like he don't do this, don't do that. But then David was not applying those same things to himself when it came to Josh Duggar. And so people got upset because David comes in and he starts trying to control everyone, allegedly. So David then in 2022 makes the decision to write a letter to the judge in Josh Duggar's case, asking for leniency, telling him that he wants to be a good Christian father and that he wants to take care of his children, and his wife and his children need him, and that, he's a good guy, and that he has all these nice things to say about Josh, right? And this is after he's been convicted, tons of evidence, after David has sat through all of that evidence. And they said David never talked to the church or the church members before he sent the letters to the judge using the church's name. I'm not sure how the elders or other members felt about it, but I know the members at least learned about it through the media. We left as soon as it happened, and I never got to talk to anyone else about it, and I'm not sure if David ever addressed it. So people actually left the church as a result of David sending this letter to the judge. And what the members said is that what they realized is that there was all these other red flags with David trying to get very into their lives, giving them directions, wanting to counsel them, forcing them to come into his office to talk to them about their intimate lives, allegedly. And that when he wrote this letter, they realized our kids aren't safe here, because if he's going to protect someone like Josh, if someone were to come into this church like Josh, David would be likely to protect him. And so they said, we felt like he was untrustworthy. We didn't feel like it was a safe environment for our future children if the pastor and the congregation couldn't be trusted to stand up to people like Josh. And the fact that he tried to help Josh and claimed that he was a good person made it even worse. So David Waller's behavior here, where he's trying to get people to come in so he can explain things away, and so he can, we're going to delete this, we're going to edit, we're going to, we want to give you a background about why this happened, about the racist comments. On the flip side, has angered people in the congregation. So this is not just his first scandal. They basically described that this is just another one of the blow-ups that have happened since David has taken over at this church. One of the major ones was obviously his die-hard support of Josh Duggar, even despite all of the evidence, the conviction, and knowing what the charges were. So think of it, David is from the pulpit telling people, don't look at this content, it's damaging, it's immoral, it's wrong. Don't do anything to self-pleasure you. Don't have these types of relationships with your wives or your husbands. But then at the same time is supporting someone like Josh and writing a letter that says he's a good person. Can you imagine being a member in that kind of situation and how that would anger people? So this situation, for people that are already maybe angry at him for this person thinks is going to lead to probably more people leaving the church, because frankly, not everyone was there that day, and not everyone wants to be associated with someone like David because of the chaos that ensues every time he gets into a pickle. So if you're a part of this church and you would like to share your experiences, if your experiences were different, if you have anything you'd like to say, make sure to send me an email at tips@withoutacrystalball.com. Obviously, I can only say that this is the email that David's church sent me. They said they're sorry. They don't stand by these things. They would not address or answer any of my questions in regards to the allegations of what David was allegedly involved in when it came to Gothard and Emily Anderson. And he wouldn't respond to any comments about, telling women to stay with a husband even if they purchase prostitutes for 5 years. All right, so Josh Duggar's best friend is getting called out for being creepy, and he's trying to cover things up, allegedly. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.